We've won.
Have we really?
Trust me. I know we have.
How?
I'm the cat lady. From now on, I win every single day.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Jonathan Goodman. I am a licensed counselor with the state of Washington and registered yoga teacher with Yoga Alliance. And instead of today me saying I'm your whispering rock for today I'm going to welcome you to the nerdy side of mental health. This is the first entry in what I'm going to call DSM-MA, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Modern Art. The DSM is something we have used for years and decades in our profession to diagnose what mental health illnesses are. And I think art can also do that. And we are going to start with a video game. All deference to Roger Ebert. He was a tremendous mind in the realm of film and television and visual arts. But he, for most of his life, argued that video games were not possibly art because they were interactive. And if you could interact with something, that would mean that you can change the thing. And if you can change the thing, then it removes the artist's vision, and so therefore it can't be art. In deference to that man, and with all due respect to him, I very much disagree. Video games have been one of my preferred ways of experiencing art and experiencing visual medium throughout my entire life. I love them a lot, and I think some of them show mental health diagnoses and mental health problems better than a lot of other art, and the fact that they are interactive sometimes makes them even more useful in showing what something like depression can look like.
My name is Susan Ashworth. I live alone in this old 2-bedroom flat. I rarely go outside. Some would say it's a lonely life, and I guess that's true, but I don't like people's company. Not lately, anyway. I only trust my cats these days, and I will miss them dearly.
Today, we are going to delve into the world of depression with a video game I first finished, according to Steam, about 11 or 12 years ago, called The Cat Lady. And I'm going to invite you to be with me on this journey as we explore what this is. So, some caveats around what you can expect in this video and some subjects that you can expect to be in this video. Because this is about depression, I'm going to give some trigger warnings for suicide. The game starts with the main character committing suicide, and yes, that might make more sense as I talk about the video game, or you might be immediately tuning out because of that. There is also ritualistic suicide, suicide that's encouraged by other people towards people who are going through stuff. There is a fair amount of graphic violence. There is torture. There is a lot of grief and loss shown throughout this in many different ways, and there is some infant mortality. It is not a violent death for that infant, but there is a very, very, very young child who passes away during this game, which I won't say much more than that, but as spoilers. And you do not see that death directly. It's depicted, but you don't see a child die visually in this thing. However, all of those triggers, notwithstanding, I will add some timestamps for you to jump around in the video if any of those things are things you would rather not see. Now, something else comes to mind too. There's a bit of implied sexual assault in this, a bit. Again, it is not something that gets depicted, but it's there. So, again, I will provide timestamps in this video for you to jump around if that's very much not something you want to see or deal with. So, a short history of why I'm doing this. I finished this game about 11 years ago, going on 12, and it is a game that captivated me when I finished it. When I finished it, I was like, I need to make some kind of blog about mental health in video games and how it's depicted, because this is just so perfect in showing depression and what it can do to people. And then that was 11 years ago, and I haven't done that. So shortly ago, let's say about a year ago, I got the idea from a particular H-Bomber Guy video that perhaps I could investigate the idea of putting up a YouTube series on this. And so here it is. This is my first attempt at this. And again, I'm picking something that I want to pick because it is so perfect, at least in my opinion, on how it presents depression visually and through this art of video games and interactivity. So, without much further ado, I will talk a little bit also about the game and like what I want this show to be and what it isn't too. So, the surface level description of what's happening here in this video game is, as I said, this game opens with a character's suicide, and shortly after that suicide, she is given a chance to go back into the world of the living and remove 5 parasites from the world. That's where some of the graphic violence is going to come in, is removing those parasites. The character entitled The Maggot Queen is the person who introduces her to this. And let's say hijinks ensue. I'm going to keep spoilers in this intro section very light, but there will be spoilers when we get to how it depicts depression and stuff like that, because it's fairly impossible for me to talk about this without spoiling some of what happens in this video game. I don't want this to be a review or a way to sell a video game to people. I want this, like I said, to be the first entry in us having a space to talk about how art, all types of art, video games, television shows, movies, there's a particular manga that I'm going to want to interject into the show fairly early that I've recently discovered. So that'll be there. But I don't want this to be necessarily a review or like, go out and buy this. I will say, though, pretty much anything I plan to cover on this show is something I have personally enjoyed and I would recommend. So if you are the type of person who likes adventure games, interactive adventure games in which you kind of guide around a character, find some items, combine them in different ways, and then, use them to solve a puzzle, and you want something that's a little bit darker, okay, a lot of bit darker, I unreservedly recommend The Cat Lady. It is a game I have enjoyed all 3 times I've played through it now. I did 2 playthroughs for this video and then also made some saves to make sure I got all of the endings, to talk about all of the ways the endings kind of impact the story. Again, spoilers will come as I'm talking about the symptomology and how this game does that. So, I'm just excited about talking about this game. So now, without actual further ado, I introduce The Cat Lady. When we're going to start discussing depression and how it looks in somebody, we typically always go to the criteria of depression within the DSM 5.1, as it is right now. So the first thing we look at is, what is this person actually experiencing and what kind of symptoms are they experiencing? These are the A criteria, and there are 9 potential A criteria. You need 5 or more of them to qualify for a diagnosis. Let's just say we'll see how much Susan qualifies according to the things that happen in this video game. So the first category is depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day, as indicated by either subjective report, like the person feels sad, empty, or hopeless, or there's an observation which can be made by others, like the client or person appearing tearful or withdrawn or isolated or a lot of different things. So I'm going to say, without question, Susan is positive for criteria A. So this is shown by a lot of different things in the video game. This game has a very muted color palette. Gray is typically going to be the only color on screen most of the time. It's just different shades of gray for the most part. There are some parts in the hospital, in the flashbacks, in which more color shows up, like the blue of the hospital gowns, the red of Susan's dress when she is in the flashback sequence. Lots and lots of color, though, is not something you're going to expect from this game. This is a very drab game, very muted in its color palette. You can also see from the therapy sessions that she has with Dr. X in Chapter 2 of the game, a psychiatrist, psychologist who appears to be very helpful to her. Some of those things can show up and be very indicative of depression. One of the most powerful experiences of depressed mood that I think this game shows, though, is what happens to Susan in Chapter 3 if your stress gauge reaches the height before the kind of coping gauge, I will call it, the relief gauge. And she has a complete breakdown, ends up in tears, and like falls asleep after crying for a day and a half. So that might be something that shows that Susan is kind of depressed. There is a nurse within the hospital as well, whose name is Liz, who may or may not be a real person, that indicate that Susan is withdrawn and a lot of her life is really not going the way that she wants to. So, again, we have a positive on our first category under the A category. Number 2, A2, is markedly diminished interest or pleasure in all or almost all activities, most of the day, nearly every day. Again, I'm going to say this is pretty undeniably positive. So look at the way that she talks with the cats when they come to her in Chapter 3. When she sees them and she interacts with them, she does make a special mention of Teacup, but these are kind of the only thing in her life that really feel good to her and feel like they are the way that she wants her life to be, and yet she talks so joylessly about them. The Maggot Queen in the beginning, and also kind of the final discussion that you have with the Maggot Queen, basically names a lot of the symptoms of depression that we're going to be talking about here. And one of them is that Susan has no joy in her life.
I really tried to find something. Took a long bath, picked up a book, watched some television, but I just couldn't get into anything. All those things seemed like worthless distractions, and I myself felt obsolete. Needless.
As far as things that people typically enjoy, let's say, like spending time with friends, Susan has almost no one that she is connected with until we meet a certain character later on in the game. So that is enough, I would say, to say that she is also positive, quote-unquote positive, for this second category. Third category is significant weight loss when not dieting or weight gain. So this is a change of more than 5% in a month. It could also be a decrease or increase in appetite nearly every day. This is maybe the only category that I don't think this game presents directly. There's two things that point me to that Susan is probably positive here, although I will give a kind of like so-so on this. Susan has almost no food in her apartment. The only food item that you get is during one of the puzzles in chapter 3. She eats a cheeseburger that she has stored in her fridge. You can also screw up this puzzle and overcook or undercook the cheeseburger to the point where she can't eat it.
This stupid thing just exploded.
So, given the fact that this woman really only has coffee creamer and one single food item in her fridge, I think it's safe to say that she's probably not eating about as much as she should. Her cheekbones are fairly prominent, even in as low poly, or I guess it's not low poly, as low fidelity as this game is, being that it's from 2012 and the graphics are kind of 2D and hand-drawn. Different characters remark, even Dr. X remarks, on how slim Susan is, and her cheekbones are much more prominent on her current timeline character model. And so I'm going to suspect she is positive on this, but I'm going to give this a, like I said, kind of a so-so. I won't immediately call positive on this one for her. Our fourth category is insomnia or hypersomnia nearly every day. You really only need to look at one sequence in the game to say that she's probably positive here. Now, this is the only time we see Susan sleep in the game, aside from times where she might have been knocked out in the hospital from her attempted overdose or from the medications that she's given while at the hospital. But what happens when she comes home in chapter 3 is she tries to do her self-care, she tries to summon her cats, all of that stuff goes, decently well, depending on how you play that sequence. However, after her interaction with Brian, the let's just say the not so compassionate neighbor.
If it's alright for you to play the fucking piano in the middle of the night, then I can bloody raise my voice if I want to. You think you own this place?
You can either break if your stress gauge is higher than your relief gauge in that, or you can kind of go to sleep mostly content. Either way, Susan sleeps for a day and a half, whether she cries herself to sleep that night or she goes to sleep in a relatively peaceful way. She sleeps for a day and a half. I think this is pretty common in her life from what I see in what's presented here.
Do you have problems sleeping?
Every night. I take pills for that. There aren't any left now, though.
In the light of recent events, I think you should stay off those pills for a while.
So we're going to tick yes. We have another positive for insomnia or hypersomnia as her fourth category here in the A category on symptomology. The fifth category is psychomotor agitation or retardation nearly every day, which is observable by others and a not merely subjective feelings of restlessness or being slowed down. So other people can see this. This requires some, observation, perhaps from us as players, but also some people comment on how she is. So psychomotor retardation is what we see in Susan. I do think she's positive here, and most likely positive. Couple things make me think this. Most of the game is done at a fairly leisurely pace. There are some times, we will see some of those. I might put one here. There are times where she moves quickly, and she's determined, and she jumps out of the way of different things. But for the most part, there's no sprint button in this game. There is no way to make Susan kind of move a little bit faster. Everything is done at a very slow walking pace. Also, she is recovering from an overdose of sleeping pills at the beginning of this game and in chapter 2. However, that said, I think I'm willing to go with this thought that early on in the game, when you first see her, when she is first waking up in the hospital, she is very, very quiet, very withdrawn. She barely speaks.
Would you confirm your name for me, please?
Susan.
Hi, Susan. I'm glad to see you're all right. You're on the ward now. Your condition is stable.
Most of the dialogue choices you have are in fact kind of like some way of saying, I don't want to answer this question. So I'm going to say, again, positive for our 5th category here on psychomotor agitation or retardation. Our 6th category, we're almost done with these symptomology categories, is fatigue or loss of energy nearly every day. So I've already talked a lot about this, that in the examples that we've seen already, I've already talked about some of this. However, there are a couple soliloquies that happen, and as she's pontificating on a bridge, it's not immediately clear whether the character on the bridge is her and she is considering jumping off the bridge and committing suicide in a different way. But many of these soliloquies kind of back up this idea of she doesn't really have a lot of joy in life. She doesn't have a lot of energy to do things. She is completely and utterly shattered by what she's gone through, which we will talk a little bit more about. So again, positive on the 6th category here. Our 7th category in the A symptomology is feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt, which may be delusional nearly every day. It cannot be just self-reproach and telling yourself off, and it can't be guilt about genuinely being sick. This is when you feel worthless, you feel guilt or shame over something that is inappropriate that you would feel guilt or shame over. This is the first, I would say, major spoiler. So if you want to jump spoilers or jump that discussion on infant mortality, check the time code and jump there. Because one of the inciting events of this game, we learn in Chapter 5, is that Susan has lost her daughter. Her daughter apparently was, unbeknownst to her and her husband, very, very, very allergic to particular pollen and allergens. And so when Susan, not knowing this, puts a bouquet of lilies in Zoe's room and then immediately gets into an argument with her husband over her husband's stress over something that he's been through and kind of her not caring and not doing enough as a mom, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I won't get into the full dynamics of this really kind of crappy exchange. You can see some of it here.
Apologizing to me for it.
It was just a couple of glasses and you had some too!
We didn't even notice that outside the storm had started. I was so absorbed in that stupid fight that I forgot all about the open window. Anyway, and the flowers. Those fucking flowers. Right there, by her bed. She had some rare allergy to pollen, but we couldn't have known that.
As Susan deals with the ramifications of this, she has so much inappropriate guilt and shame over this. She hates flowers. She is more than happy to say it, and multiple times in the game.
No tears shed for me. No flowers on my grave. But that's okay. I never liked flowers. I wouldn't miss that. Is this supposed to be my reward?
Flowers. I hate flowers.
Flowers?
Maybe one day you will forgive flowers, Mrs. A.
Maybe. Or maybe not. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push it.
Don't worry, Mrs. A. Could have happened to anyone.
I'll clean it in a minute, but please, be more careful in the future, yes?
And You can also see some of that in the therapy discussions that she has with Dr. X and chats that she has with Liz, the nurse.
It's not really about safety. I've just felt sad for a long time now. Really sad, you know? Somehow it brings me down even more when I go out and see all those happy, successful people. It makes me feel more like a failure. If I don't see it, it doesn't hurt that much.
I think it is one of the strongest arguments we can make that she is also positive on this category. Our second to last category, our penultimate category here on the symptomology of depression, is diminished ability to think or concentrate or indecisiveness nearly every day. So there's a couple things that point to this being a thing. Is the difficulty in paying her electrical bills. In the beginning of chapter 3, when she comes back from her experience with Dr. X and she escapes from the hospital, she realizes that she cannot take a shower because she's forgetting to pay her electrical bills. Some of that is because of how little money she has. She also has some difficulty paying her bills of all kinds. Those raise the stress meter when you find them on both counts. There is some indecisiveness that we can see with Susan as spoilers, maybe not as big as the spoilers that I shared earlier around the reasons for her grief. But Susan discovers that Dr. X, this psychiatrist who she's been talking to here and there, is actually a serial killer.
For what it's worth, I would have let you go if it wasn't for Liz.
So when she discovers this by the fact that he murders her and she comes back again, because this is now her superpower, she finds a key that Liz, who turns out has been dead the entire time, could have left for her. There is some dialogue earlier in the game.
You really listened to everything I said after all. I'll be back. When you need help, I'll be there, Susan. But right now, it's time for me to let go.
No!
That this shows that Liz might have, from beyond the grave, left the key for Susan. Now, when you use this key, you can leave. The screaming that you hear from Dr. X's, next victim is something that you can ignore. However, in every playthrough I've done, I have gone to exact some revenge on Dr. X.
I can leave now and forever forget about this place and Dr. X. I have my own problems. I'm not cut out to bring murderers to justice. I've got the key. It's clearly been left here for me to find. Was it Liz who did it? If it really was her, it's clear she would have wanted me to leave. If she'd planned a revenge, surely she would have left me a fucking gun instead. On the other hand, this man is a serial killer. He murdered a lot of women. He murdered me. He will carry on killing if I don't put a stop to it. And I'm pretty sure none of those brain-dead idiots upstairs will believe my story. Just like when I told them about Liz on the roof. They'll never take my word over the doctor's. I'm just a fucked up loser to them. But the screaming, he's got someone in there. His next victim. It's probably too late to save her, but what if it isn't? I told the old lady I'm not a killer. Maybe I'm wrong. I've never tasted vengeance before. Not like this. What if it feels good? It's time to decide. Do I stay and fight? Or leave and carry on with my life like all this never happened?
So, I think, again, this is becoming kind of a maybe obvious thing, but we have positive for diminished ability to think, concentrate, or indecisiveness on Susan's behalf. The last category for depression is one that I don't think we are gonna have any struggles finding her positive for. The last symptom category for depression is recurrent thoughts of death, and not just fear of dying, reoccurrent suicidal ideation without a specific plan, or a suicide attempt or specific plan for committing suicide. Now, we don't even need to deal with the first two parts of that. A suicide attempt or a specific plan for committing suicide, Susan definitely has, because it's what opens this game. She takes pills, a overdose of her sleeping pills that she's getting from her doctor, and takes her own life at the very beginning of the game. The fact that she returns from the dead to exact revenge on these 5 parasites is kind of immaterial. We have enough to say, yes, she is absolutely having suicidal thoughts and the suicide plan culminating with an actual suicide attempt. So we have 8 out of 9 qualifiers for depression. I think, being a little generous and saying 8 or 9. I think, in my gut, I would say this person fits all 9, and this is unquestionably like every category of depression possible. However, because of, some lack of information that we get around exactly how severe her inability to eat is, I will be safe and say that we have 8 of 9. However, we only need 5 to have a positive for depression. So not only is Susan showing a positive for depression, this is looking like a pretty severe depression. The next thing that we look at is, do the symptoms cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning? A long, long time ago, you could not diagnose any mental disorder if it was not causing significant harm in that person's life, or distress or impairment of some sort. In our modern day, we now have like little qualifiers like without awareness on depression and other diagnoses. However, I think it's pretty safe to say that Susan is also pretty aware of her depression. So again, the game starts with her killing herself. She is having occupational stress. She cannot actually meet her financial obligations from that bit in Chapter 3. And she's very much not reading her role performance. What do I mean by role performance? We as counselors sometimes look at, are you actually doing the things that a reasonable person would suspect that you would do in your life, given, your given gender, age, role, and stuff like that. Susan has been married. Her husband also committed suicide after her inciting event, let's say, and the reason she hates flowers.
Is this supposed to be my reward?
Flowers. I hate flowers.
It's safe to say I don't think she's filling her role at this moment. She is not looking for another romantic partner. Not that you have to, let's be clear. But she's not looking for another romantic partner. The only person that she has in her life is Mitzi, who comes in Chapter 4 and sticks around for the rest of the game, depending on some of your choices in the ending. And it's just fairly clear that Susan is not able to perform in the way that she wants to in her life because of her diagnosis and because of the trouble that she's having. Next, for C, we look at whether or not this is actually something that's happening with this person's life, or whether or not it might be because of a substance or another medical condition. So, because we see that in the hospital, she is more lethargic, and she's probably received a lot of medications. She does receive medications other times in the gameplay, and in fact, that's a way that you solve a puzzle, is intentionally getting medication that you're not actually supposed to take. Spoilers, minor spoilers there, and actually belongs to another patient in the hospital. Because we see that, yes, we could potentially say some of these things might be due to the drugs that she's taken willfully, or the drugs that she's prescribed at the hospital. She does have wine with Mitzi once in an early chapter in the game. However, I'm going to say it's unlikely that the substance is the reason why she's depressed. She is depressed because of her inciting trauma and her inability to overcome how much that trauma has affected her.
Most days, it's enough of a struggle to crawl out of bed. I don't see the point in anything. I just want to disappear. And I hate everyone else because they know how to be happy. Everywhere I turn, there are people filled with hope and will to live. Or people so pitiful, they make me ashamed to be alive. I don't want them. There's nobody there for me. I am alone. I just want to vanish.
In fact, now that I use the T word, I will also say I think would be fairly easy for me to diagnose her with a different mental disorder, but I am a trauma specialist. I'm going to talk about trauma enough on this channel. We're going to stick with the depression diagnosis for her. The last thing that we should consider is at least one major depressive episode is not better explained by schizoaffective disorder and is not superimposed on schizophrenia, schizophrenic disorder, delusional disorder, or other specified and unspecified schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders. This is just a check to be like, hey, is this depression something that is happening because of what's actually happening in this person's life? Or is this potentially something that could be something that is a psychotic syndrome? There are multiple different times and incidences in the game. Most of these happen when Susan has died. However, I'm going to count these as some psychotic features of Susan's diagnosis. So in this category, I'm going to say, at the very least, Susan has some schizophrenic symptoms that manifest when she is experiencing these near-death experiences, let's say, as she kind of goes through something that would potentially kill someone, and then she pops back in to the real world. But she also sees Liz, who is dead, in the actual canon timeline of the game. And some of these things happen with other people present. There is a section in chapter 6 when she is searching the homes of all of these people who potentially could be the quote-unquote Eye of Adam, that shows that she can interact with somebody who is not actually someone that she knows very well. So I'm going to say there could be some schizophrenia here. However, we will account for that in our final diagnosis. I still do believe depression is her main diagnosis, and we'll account for that as we kind of make our final determination. And in the last possible category for is this depression or is this not, it's there has never been a manic episode or hypermanic episode. So the game definitely does not show it to us. If there is something in Susan's life in which she has gone absolutely off the wall, kind of crazy, and is happy and is taking a lot of risks in her life, other than killing herself, the game does not show it to us. So I think it's safe to say that she does not have a manic or hypomanic episode. Our final diagnosis for Susan Ashworth then is F32.2. Major depressive disorder, severe, because of all of those categories that she has, and we're going to add mood congruent psychotic features, in that the things that she's seeing, the supernatural experiences she's having, the extrasensory things that are shown in the game, are things that are concurrent with her depression and her sadness. Here's where I'm going to give a slight story synopsis and kind of a wrap up for what I think is a very good game to display depression and what depression looks like in us human beings. So Susan begins the game by killing herself. She comes back from the gift of the Maggot Queen, rather. She comes back from the gift of the Maggot Queen that she can blow out these candles, hinting that she is kind of letting these people who are potentially close to death go, and then kind of using their life force to come back into the world, of which she really only has 5. And then she does kill all 5 of these parasites. Dr. X is her first in Chapter 2. In Chapter 4, we see her deal with the cannibal and his wife. There is a cannibal who is posing as the animal control individual, but he kidnaps Susan. This is, where I will throw that little time code up for if you would like to skip any discussion of sexual assault. So he threatens to sexually assault her. He is interrupted by his wife, who then pours bleach over Susan to make it so that she is no longer desirable for her husband. A rape myth that I really wish we would get past in our society. Susan is a attractive enough woman, but something you're not going to be able to convince me is not a thing anymore is this idea that people just get overpowered when they do some form of sexual assault. And why would they ever sexually assault someone who is unattractive? I will forever be convinced of what I learned at the Sexual Assault Center, that sexual assault is not about sex. It is a power and control abuse in which sex is used as a tool of that power and control. And whether or not Susan's had her face removed by the bleach by this cannibal lady is immaterial. Regardless, this guy shows that he is not the greatest person in the world.
What's the matter, sleepyhead? Had a bad dream? Do you want me to give you a cuddle and a kiss? Take the nightmares away?
And they leave Susan for dead. She comes back again, kills both of them. That brings us up to 3 of the parasites removed. In Chapter 5, another parasite comes to her building and kills her again, this time with a blow to the head with a hammer, and she takes care of him with the help of her cats. And lastly, at the very end of the game, she and her new friend Mitzi track down the Eye of Adam, someone who has been convincing others to commit suicide through this concoction that he's developed. They discover him. They discover that he is doing this in many ways because he is paralyzed and hates his life and is being taken care of completely by his father, and is unable to do most things that he would like to do in life. And so he is on the internet trying to convince others to kind of join him in his misery. And this game can end in multiple different ways. In the final sequence, you can either accept the mask. There's only one mask for 3 different people. The father of Adam has already decided that he's not going to take the mask and tries to give it to you. You can either keep the mask or give it to Mitzi. Mitzi has declared earlier on in the game in Chapter 4 that she is potentially dying of cancer, and she will probably not live any longer. You can accept that, or with Susan's last possible dalliance with her superpower, you can die because of the gas, give the mask to Mitzi so that she survives, and then you come back to life and you two confront the Eye of Adam together. And there's multiple different ways that you can end this. You can either kill the Eye of Adam, or Mitzi can kill him, or you can spare him. The best ending of the game happens when you have completed a number of different tasks throughout the game and gotten to the point where you've shown that Susan is capable of using this power for good, and Mitzi's cancer is magically cured. She survives, and it turns out that they visit her daughter's grave every year so that she now has a companion. The best thing I will say about the ending, however, has to do with one of the most important parts of this game. This game does not just show depression. This game shows how you recover from depression. One of the basic tools for getting out of depression, according to CBT, is what's called behavioral activation. Behavioral activation is doing things, basically. Depression is a diagnosis that wrecks a person's ability to feel joy, to feel worthwhile, to engage in life. And the best way out of that spiral is to create a different thing. One of my favorite quotes from Rem about how he developed this game is, he said, maybe when you take charge of your life, you're never really a victim. Even if bad stuff happens to you, maybe you only become a victim when you give up and stop trying. In my experience as a therapist, this is 100% true. And this is, I think, what helps Susan out of her depression. Helps her no matter what ending happens, no matter what choices you make at the end about whether to kill or not kill the Eye of Adam, Susan finds companionship. She develops a blog, she finds other people who are going through depression and helps them, and through this, she gets the ability to recover.
I get it. You don't want to tell me because I'm a fucking suicidal maniac. Is that it?
No, Miss Ashworth. No, I didn't mean it like that. Okay. Maybe to some extent. Just replace maniac with victim and fucking with recovering. You only just come back from the hospital. Whatever it was that made you do it, you proved you are capable of going through with it.
One of the most important things as it relates to mental health recovery and behavioral activation happens in Chapter 3, and it's basically the entirety of Chapter 3. Chapter 3 gets a mechanic that does not repeat at all through the rest of the game. I think kind of unfortunately. I would have liked to see this through other parts of the game as well, particularly Chapter 6, where you're searching around trying to find evidence and stuff. However, there are 2 meters that appear on the screen at a certain point. Neither of those meters are there when the chapter starts. However, if something happens to stress Susan out, the stress meter will appear. If something happens that makes Susan happy or relieved, that meter will appear. And then eventually you have both meters on the screen, and whichever one fills up first determines what happens at the end of Chapter 3. So you can, for example, come home and Susan needs to take a shower after the days have left her slightly exhausted. And she needs to get Dr. X's blood off of her. She needs to get clean in so many ways. And so if you go to take a shower immediately, what you will find is that the power will get cut off almost immediately after only a couple minutes. And this is because Susan has not kept up with her power bill, as it were. So if you, again, try to take a shower, the shower turns off, it raises her stress meter because she's like, shit, I have not paid the power. If you instead go to her bag first, so you kind of need to play this a little bit before you know what you should do. If you go to her bag first and get money out of the bag, she will find some bills, which will still stress her out. I don't think there's a way to avoid her getting stressed out as like the first thing. But then go feed the meter, you won't get stressed from having that happen when you go into the shower. So her being able to take care of some of the things that she needs to do raises her relief meter. The one that's most obvious that you can screw up is she goes to eat her burger, the one thing in her fridge. And if you overcook the burger, it'll be burned, it'll raise her stress meter because she screwed up the only food that she had in the house. Or if you cook the burger correctly, based on how much the wrapper says you should cook it and what wattage on your microwave, you earn some relief for the relief gauge, I'll call it. So because of that, this chapter in and of itself is a perfect example of how depression recovery happens. At this point in the game, we've had 2 chapters of Susan being very obviously clinically depressed, and as we talked about, very severely clinically depressed. And in this chapter starts the idea that, okay, she can start to come out of this. And that very fact about this portion of the game is one of the most beautifully adapted things, I would say.
Hello, Miss Ashworth. How are you? Are you feeling better?
Do I know you?
Of course. You don't remember me. My name is Mitzi Hunt.
When Mitzi comes into her life, she has a friend for the first time ever. Well, not ever. She has a friend for the first time in quite some time since this instigating trauma for her. And this, I think, is beautifully summed up by Rem, the sole developer of this game. He says, "It's friendship in pure form. At least that was my intention, to show it's possible to find a true friend in this rotten world. It's not easy, especially in Susan's parasite-filled world. But at some point, you have to make a decision to trust someone, to get out of your comfort zone and let a stranger into your life." That's what she does with Mitzi. And then Mitzi comes with her own experience and her own goals. Mitzi comes with this goal of finding the Eye of Adam, as I briefly discussed, and confronting him. One of the things that I agree with from the end of the game is this bit from Mitzi.
You lied to me. You never said you wanted to kill him.
Now, wasn't that quite obvious? What did you think I wanted to do? Have a coffee with him? Chat about the weather or politics? For God's sake, I'm here because this son of a bitch needs to die. If I don't kill him now, he'll just carry on and more innocent people will lose their lives. But I really just want to talk. I want to face Jack's killer and tell him what he's done to me.
So, the thing that helps Susan to come out of her depression is most likely, in part, taking care of the parasites and this mission that Mitzi gives her and this companionship that they find in trying to track down the Eye of Adam in Chapter 6. So, some final thoughts on this game. As you might have seen from some of the gameplay, I am not going to sit here and say that this game is one of the most beautiful things ever made. I do think the visuals match perfectly with the themes. However, there are some internet personalities and internet reviewers who will claim that modern games can look like Flash games. However, this absolutely does kind of look like a Flash game. It is ostensibly made in the adventure game creator, and Rem talks about some of that in some of the interviews I've linked below. However, this game was made in 2012. Even in 2012, it looked a little primitive. In 2025, it is not the prettiest game. Again, I think the visuals are outstanding in showing the themes of depression and the recovery from depression too. Even the last sequence where Susan's looking up into the sky, she is brightly colored, the sky is bright, there is color on the entirety of the screen for one of the first times in this entire video game. It is incredible in visually showing what's going on in her head and what's going on in her journey and her adventure, if you will. It still doesn't look amazing. If you are somebody who needs cutting edge graphics, this is not going to give you what you want. The interface is something I will say is kind of another drawback as well. It is entirely possible to play this game with a keyboard, and it's very simple to use because of that. However, because of that, it does not hide a lot of necessary items in the environment. Anything you walk past comes up on your screen and you can interact with it and pick it up. So it does make this game a little easier on even modern adventure game standards. Certainly, there are no rubber chickens with pulleys in the middle in this game. And because of that, you're not going to be challenged a lot by it. I wrote in this script initially, and I still kind of think is somewhat true, there's 4 puzzles in this entire game. There are some that require a lot of brain work, and there are absolutely some that I needed to look up in walkthroughs. But it's not going to tax your brain a whole hell of a lot. Most of the solutions are sitting there right in front of you, literally sitting right in front of you in a particular puzzle in Chapter 5. So this is not necessarily going to challenge your brain and make you pop for just how amazing this game is in its difficulty. However, as I said before, wholly recommend this game. To repeat what I said before, This is not going to be a show where I bag on a game that I don't like or don't think is good. Anything that I feature here is something that I think is good, and I absolutely do recommend The Cat Lady, even if you've watched this entire video and been spoiled by all the things that happen in it. I think the experience of playing this game is awesome. So it comes with a recommend for me. 2 thumbs up from John. A pretty big caveat with all of the reservations that I have put forth here is that this game was almost entirely made by one person. Like, the only other thing that I could even possibly complain about this game with is the audio. Some of the voice actors, like the lead actor for Susan Ashworth, are outstanding.
He had a passion for trains. Although he hated being a train driver, he had always enjoyed watching them move. But now, his train model was moving all on its own. He was absolutely certain he'd left it switched off. And yet, there it was, running at crazy speed, remote control missing.
Some of them are maybe a little less polished.
Yeah, I can easily fix that. There's an electrical store that's open till late. I'll get some stuff. I'll be back before you know it.
What? Jesus. No. You were not supposed to be here!
Some characters like Mitzi are perfectly good in their presentation and in fact very strong in how they are like presenting their voices in this game, but there were clearly some like home audio setups that did not lead to great quality audio being released.
Brain tumor. Her name is glioblastoma.
Huh.
Yep, they're all girls, the way I imagine it. Just look at their names. Lymphoma, melanoma, myeloma, leukemia, sarcoma. Each of them a fucking goddess of death. Beautiful and ruthless.
So all that said, especially with that caveat that one person made this game, if you are looking for a significantly dark and violent walking simulator adventure game, you honestly can't go wrong with this. It is, again, something that for 12 years I've wanted to talk to people about how effective it is at showing depression and how depression affects people. So check it out if you want. If not, stay tuned for the next possible episode of DSM-MA. The next episode I am planning on is on Spec Ops: The Line, and a diagnosis you will probably see very often on this show, post-traumatic stress disorder. However, some recent happenings in my life have made it so The Last of Us might actually be the next episode that I post here. So stay tuned for that if you're interested in either of them. All right, and lastly, I'm going to ask something of people who would like to participate in it. If you like this video, feel free to give it a like and push it up the, unfeeling algorithm that runs Google at this point. If you really like this and you want to be notified and aware of the things that I post going forward in DSM-MA, or you want to join me for some of the meditations that I'll put up, that'll definitely be more numerous than episodes of DSM-MA, please do that. Both of those things are something I'm very interested in doing. The reason I'm asking this is the real reason I started this channel. This is a passion project that, like I said in the beginning, has been going on for almost 12 years for me. I've wanted to do this for a really long time. I'm finally getting the gumption to do it, and I do want to make things that are useful to people. If there are video games, television shows, movies that you would like me to cover, hell, I am going to be covering a manga in the near future. So if there is something that you think is out there that depicts mental health in a wonderful, wonderful way, please let me know. If there's something I missed in this game about depression that you really think needs to be said, please add it to the comments. I am a fallible human being. I make mistakes. I miss things. I am imperfect. And hopefully, by continuing this conversation, not only do future episodes of the show become better, we all get to have a discussion about mental health, and that, I think, is a discussion that we have sorely been needing to have in our society for a really long time. Not an argument about mental health, but a discussion. People talking about things, giving, taking, trying to understand each other, trying to find empathy and compassion for people. These are the things that our society needs, I feel, and I would like to do my best to do that. So again, in the spirit of empathy and compassion, please keep the comments civil, respectful, and academic. No. Keep the comments awkward, brave, and kind. To quote a woman who I am going to be having a ticker, much like Civi's sewer count, up here telling you how many times I mentioned the name Brene Brown, but according to the Brene Brown, please keep the comments awkward, brave, and kind. I want to create a universe, and I hope you join me with it, that is awkward, brave, and kind. So do that in little ways, and one of the ways you can do that is be nice in the comments. Other than that, please take care of yourselves, and as always, this won't change. I'll change my intro thing, but my outro is going to remain the same for these things, because I think it's something we all need to hear, and I need to hear it myself sometimes. Stay safe and proceed mindfully.
Now, I've forgiven the world and myself too. I teach myself to smile again. One day I'll get there. I know I will. Even if it takes me not 9, but 900 lives.
Gonna delete this part of the video because I'm not recording it after work hours.
He hoped he was just imagining things, tired as he was. But there was another surprise waiting for him in his bedroom. A giant, blood-soaked zombie cat sat on his bed.
Now that's really stupid.
Fair enough. That didn't really happen. Everyone knows there's no such thing as giant zombie cats, right?